Meet Michelle McIntyre. Michelle wears many hats, from serving in church ministry to being an entrepreneur, a nurse, a lecturer, and a life coach. Michelle does it all while parenting three teenagers. Born and raised in St. John's Road, a ghetto area in St. Catherine, Michelle encountered sicknesses, poverty, physical and sexual abuse as a child. That affected her social, emotional, and academic development for some time until, by the help of God, she broke free from an abusive father daughter relationship and dared to venture into the world with God as her guide. During her early adulthood, Michelle would have gotten married, and the union produced three beautiful children. Through faith in God and with the support of her church family and other counselors, her journey to healing began, and her skills, talents, and ministry unearthed. Michelle stands strong today in her Christian faith and serves in her church and church community as youth president, choir director, praise team leader, member of the National Youth Council, sectional choir director, youth mentor at the Ministry of National Security, counselor, and healing and empowerment coach. Additionally, Michelle is an entrepreneur, branding Michelle Marie's Body Essentials and Virtue Hats. She is also a recording artist, an author, and a publisher, having written and published 3 books. Her books, namely Overcoming Abuse by God's Design and Healing of a Broken Woman, can be found on Amazon, along with her 3rd book, which is a planner and notebook. Michelle is a trained and a practicing nurse, a lecturer, and YouTuber. And if you think she done, she just a come, because Michelle is currently pursuing a diploma in Ministerial Studies and a degree in social work. Today on Defying the Odds, Michelle McIntyre tells her story. Michelle McIntyre, hi. Welcome to Defying the
Hi.
It is so great to have you today.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. You have agreed to talk to us about your journey, to tell us your story today on Defying the Odds and what a story it is.
Right.
I want everybody, all the ladies, young girls, everyone, to tune into this one because it promises
My God.
a blessing. All right, Michelle.
Amen. To God be the glory.
Yes, I want to start by asking you to tell us a little about your early years. You grew up with your mom in a single parent home in the earliest part of your life. And your mother had 5 of you. And in those early years, it was a single parent household. Talk to me a little bit about what was your life like in those tender years.
All right. So when I remember having sense, as early as I can remember, it was my mom and my siblings alone. That would have been my earliest memory. So it was just, I have 3 brothers and another sister. So it was just us alone. My mom was working, so sometimes you would have to stay with my eldest sister or my grandmother, who did not live far from us. We were born and raised in the heart of the ghetto. That was a stigma for me at one point, but now I'm proud because I am a proud product of the ghetto. So I was born and raised in ghetto, the inner city, as some persons would call it. But then in my very right, St. John's Road. For those who know, you have to drive past it to go Dovecot.
Oh, okay.
Right. So in the heart of the inner city, and when I say heart, I mean heart, we live down to the bottom of the lane. So it wasn't even at the top of the lane or in the middle, we were at the bottom of the lane, right? And as I said, it was my mom and us alone until I fell ill. I didn't know any father in those early days. This was like before I was 6 years old, because I took sick at age 6. So didn't know anything about a father at that age. I remember the morning when I woke up not feeling well. I remember that my mom was, making an alarm about my legs being swollen the morning. I was roasting with fever, and I was, not just my legs were swollen, but I was swollen because I was a tiny child. I am 5 feet flat right now, so you should know how little I was at that age, and I was swollen. So my mom, made an alarm that morning, and I was rushed to the hospital. It took a while before the doctors found out what was wrong with me, so I had to be going back and forth to the hospital because of what was happening. They ran a lot of tests on me. This time I was in pain also. I was passing my urine, and so my urine had the color of Pepsi at one point. So that was really, really dark.
Yeah.
The amount of blood passed in my urine. There was a lot of stones in my urine also, according to the tests that they ran. At the time, there was no diagnosis for me, and so they were just treating the symptoms of whatever it was that was going on with my body. Now, for a single mom with 5 children and being a low-income earner, that could not have been easy.
Yeah.
Could not have been easy. And so a child sick and medical expenses now being added to life that was already difficult, that made it even worse.
Right.
And so during being back and forth in the hospital, being admitted in the hospital, having to get medication and all of that, my mom would have needed some help. My family helped, as in relatives, but you're going to need a child's father. But before we get there, I kept on going back and forth to the hospital until they started to match the symptoms that I was having with some other cases that were in the Caribbean. Now, it got to the point where they realized that only 5 of us in the Caribbean were displaying these similar symptoms. At the time that I was diagnosed, 3 of the persons that were displaying similar symptoms had already passed. They had already died. They were children. I think only 1 was an adult. And they had passed. So it left myself and another little girl in the university hospital that, had the same thing. My younger days, it was very difficult with school and church because of how often I would have gotten sick. It got to the point where one of my kidneys was taken because of the disease. I had a renal disease, and it took one of my kidneys, or ate away one of my kidneys, or dissolved it or destroyed it, whatever term, but one was gone. Okay. And so I was at the point where I needed a kidney transplant. Now, my mom, needing the help with me, started to search for my father. My father was about his business because according to my mom's, story, he denied all of us at birth, right? So none of us were his according to him, even when we come look like him, right? And so he was about his own business. My mom had to search for him to let him know that I was sick and she would have needed his help, and also him to be tested as a donor for me to get the transplant. Now, at the time that I needed the transplant, there were many, many persons on the list waiting to get a kidney transplant, and so none was readily available for me, and I would have gone to the bottom of the list, of course, right? And so right there, you know, it did not look like there was any hope inside. But because my mom looked for him and he came, you know, to visit, he came back into our lives. Being that innocent little girl, I was a daddy's girl. I was a daddy's girl right off the bat. I just met this man and I just loved this man as my father, right? Wow. And so he would come to visit, you know, best time of my life, and I would cry whenever he was to leave. He has, you know, the singing ability, can't sing like me, but he can sing. And so that was one of the other things that I loved about my father. And so he came, and I remembered one time in particular, and this was me being between the ages of 6 to 8, very young. And I remember he came to look for me. I wasn't doing well. I was in a lot of pain. And I remember I was crying. And I remember him saying he wished if he could, you know, exchange, you know, our bodies at the time so that he could take the pain that I was feeling. The pain was so severe. And, you know, the medications were not helping. I remember when he was going to leave, I cried uncontrollably, you know, because I wanted him to stay. And, you know, I believe that was the point where my mom made the decision to accept him back into our lives. You know, they were married, you know, they were married years ago, but they separated because of, I guess, many reasons. But she accepted him back into our lives. You know, I know for many reasons, but one, she needed the help because with me being in the hospital, she would have to look after my other siblings, come to me at the hospital, and then leave there in time to go to work and do the same thing in the evening so that she could take the stuff that I needed. No, I was one of those who don't eat hospital food. And so my mom had to ensure that she brought breakfast and dinner for me and ensure that I had stuff, you know, for lunch, or she would leave money for me to buy from any of the men walking and selling on the hospital compound, you know. And so she needed the help. And so my father was back in our lives. At first, this was a good thing. For me, it was a good thing, you know, to have him there. And so I stuck to him. And, you know, whenever he would, at the time he drove a truck and he would deliver juice all over Jamaica, because most of the places, the parishes that I know, it's because, you know, I would travel with my father when he would, you know, be going to make deliveries. And I remember, you know, to cut the story a bit short, I remember when the hugs and, you know, the kisses started to change from being, you know, the innocent hugs and kisses that a father would, you know, would give to a daughter.
Just before there, though, you were sharing with me that with your sickness, your grandmother would have heard about a church service that she took you to because of the whole donor. They were seeking a donor. Your mother needed help and all of that. So,
right.
Because before we talk about the other experiences with your father, talk to us about that part of the story.
Right. All right. So having, you know, spent years back and forth with the doctors, not certain about, you know, what they were doing, it got to a point where the doctors gave me days to live. they gave me days to live because there was nothing more that they medically could have done for me. And so they told my mom to take me home and make me as comfortable as she could because, you know, I was going to die. They could not have done anything else. And the disease was aggressive. I went home and I loved my grandmother dearly. And so I would spend a lot of time with her. And I was sitting in her lap one day. She was feeding me. I wasn't a lover of food, so I wasn't eating a lot either. And she was feeding me. And where my grandmother lived at the time, we were overlooking the road, St. John's Road. So we were overlooking the road. And so, you know, every hearse that was passing to go up to Dovecot, we would be seeing everything, right? And I remember sitting at the window with my grandmother feeding me. And I remember I planned my funeral. It's like I didn't even know the seriousness of death and whatever it came with. It was that serious for me as an innocent little child. And so I was planning my funeral, you know, it was like an event, you know, and I planned the color casket that I wanted. I'm a lover of blue. Blue is my favorite color. And so, you know, I wanted the blue casket, the blue and white casket. And, you know, I told her who I wanted to sing and who I wanted to read the Bible. Innocently planning my funeral because this was it. And it was not something that I was afraid of, you know. When I think back, when I look back, there was no fear in that. It was just the innocence of a child, you know. But there was another innocence that you know overshadowed that, and that was the innocent faith of a child. And so, you know, my grandmother being apostolic also, you know, my grandmother heard there was going to be a tent crusade, and there was this apostle that was coming at the crusade. My grandmother asked my mom if she could have taken me to the crusade. Now, this is a sick child, but my grandmother wanted to take me there because all other hope was lost, you know. All other hope was lost. This was all we knew, Jesus and believing in him. And she took me to the crusade, and I remember I was there sitting with her, and the preacher said that somebody was there with a terminal illness. Now, I don't know what terminal mean at that time, but I just knew what he was talking about. And he asked, you know, for the person to come. So my grandmother, you know, signaled for me to go. You know, it was like we connected in the moment because I was looking at her to say, you know, if I should go. And she, you know, asked me to go, and I went up, and I remember him asking if I believed that God would heal me. And blindly, with the faith of a child, I said yes. I'm a believer now. I believe, like, that was it. I believed, you know, that God could heal me. And, you know, persons would say, you know, what does a child know about that? And, you know, the good thing is that you really don't know, because then there's no question, there's no questioning, because it's like the more we know is the more we want to question, and the more we want to, you know, doubt, you know. So it's a good thing when so all you can do is just trust. And so I did that, and I just went, didn't know what was going to happen next, but I believed. And, you know, he spoke into my life. And the next clinic dates that I was to go at UE, they just gave my mom that date because, you know, they were supposed to, but I was not expected to live to see that clinic date. And when my mom brought me to the renal clinic, and the doctors checked and they did whatever, the doctor said to my mom, "Mom, whatever it is that you did when you took her home, continue to do it, because the disease that was meant to kill me had now gone into remission." There was nothing that was showing. There was, everything just stopped. It just stopped right there. I mean, the doctors, they didn't know what to do at that point. And so they sent me home, you know, with my mom, told her to do whatever. And that was prayer. So yeah, we went home with prayer. I remember I was taking a whole lot of medications. I remember I was taking 7 of this and 4 of that and 5 of that. And I had to take them right through the day. So like for one day, I'm taking almost 30 tablets for one day.
Oh.
I was chubby because of, what was happening with my body. I had pimples on my face because of the side effects of the medication and all of that. Now, again, with the faith of a child, I decided I was not going to take any more medication. Now, I'm not telling anybody to do this if that's not where you are at. I decided, that's all, I was not going to take any more medication. I was tired. And so I threw them away. Remember, it's a terminal illness, and it almost, the doctors intended for me to live on these medications for the rest of my life. I wasn't supposed to have a normal life at all. I was supposed to live with taking these. I was not going to have it. And so with that blind faith, I decided I was not going to take any more medication. And I did not take any more. And so I wasn't even worried that I was going to die either, because I stopped taking them. I just decided I'm not take them, and that's it. I believed in the Lord, and that was final. And, we carried on. Now, my father came back into our lives.
Yes. And things now took a turn.
Oh, yes.
Now took a turn from the innocent relationship that a little girl should have with her dad.
Yeah.
Things started to take another turn. Let's talk about.
Oh, yes. So I remember, as I said, I'm a, lovey-dovey kind of person. And so I would stick to my father. But I remember when that father-daughter chemistry changed. I remember when the touches started to feel uncomfortable. And I remember the first wrong kiss. I remember when his tongue went into my mouth, just a little bit. And, as a child, that was like, ew, that kind of thing that just never feel right? At this point, I was 8 going up to that, still a little girl, growing. But I should tell you that because of the sickness and what it did to my body, I had little breasts.
Okay.
So my body was a little bit more mature than, the regular 6, 8, 10-year-old who have flat chests, right? So I remember when the touches and it started to feel wrong, and then I remember, because I shared a room with my brothers. Okay. All of us were a little far apart in age, right? Because one of my brothers like 1 year and a couple months older than I am, right? And so we were sharing the same room. And I remember nights my father would come into my room, and it was like when I wake up in the morning, like I wondered if it was a dream,
right?
Because he would run out if I shifted. At that point, I didn't know. It was when I got a little bit older and started to become aware, I would, realize what was happening back then, at that early stage. So at that age, when I woke up in the morning, I was, so I didn't pay any attention to it, just put it off like maybe that was a dream or whatever.
Right.
But then when it became, real was when I woke up and still felt sensations.
Okay.
From what he did in the night. So I'd wake up and feel a little funny, in the perineal area, perineal nursing, in the lower
area.
Right. Private area.
Yes.
All right. So the sensations would still be there, and that's when I realized that was something off, and I started to kind of, ease off. But one thing I should let you know, that he was a very abusive father. Very father. Now, if him come and like you clean the house and there's dust under the dresser or whatever, something never move when you're sweeping, it will be hell in the house. And him beat for everything, right? And so there was a fear in all of us for him, you know, and so this was not somebody that you would confront because, you know, it's a big bad wolf.
That fear included your mom.
Oh, yes.
Afraid of him.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Everybody was afraid of him. Even family members, persons in the community were afraid of this man because, you know, he had that Don persona. And so everybody was afraid of him, you know, to the point where if you hear him truck coming from the highway, you shift up fast. Whatever it is you're doing, you ensure that you know, finish. If it's plain, if it's whatever, you shift up fast and ensure that you have a book in your hand or something to look like you were doing something productive before he would come in. If your chores were not done, you ensure that them finish from hear the truck coming, because we know what would have happened if, you know. So that was the kind of, you know, environment that we grew up in. And so when the abuse started, the molestation started, you know, they would come into my room and he would try whatever, would touch my breast, you know, my private parts, and he would carry on for a while. This carried on for a while, Latoya. And then I remember the first time when there was penetration, my father raped me. I remember when there was penetration. Look here, I was numb. I was numb. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move.
Yeah, you were just a child.
You get me? I don't think I had gotten to the age of 10. I don't think I'd gotten to the age of 10, but it was around, you know?
Yes.
And so I couldn't move. And that happened, and the threat came after, if you say anything to anybody, and then the threats kept on coming, who he would hurt and who he would beat, and all kind of stuff would come, and the threat about coming to school, to beat me, coming to church to beat me, and the threats would come. I was very active in church, by the way. I was active in church already. I was baptized at age 5 and right into ministry. They had to put me on a speaker box to sing whenever I would sing, because as I said, I'm 5 flat now, so imagine where I was, you know, back then. And so I was a minister already, and all of this was happening and nobody knew, right? The threats would come and he would continue to have his way. Penetration didn't happen a lot. It wasn't something that happened every week. So his persona was a Don's persona. And so even persons in the community were fearful of him, right? So family, relatives, community members were fearful of him. And so when the molestation started, I couldn't say anything. I didn't know how to go up against this person. And I remember when penetration happened the first time, I remember when it happened, yes, that means my father raped me. It was not consensual. I did not consent to anything. This just happened. I couldn't fight him. You know, I couldn't fight him. I was numb. So it was just happening. You know, I was numb. And then after that, the threats came. The threats about who would hurt and where it would hurt us and all of that came. So being a child of that age and, you know, having this hanging over your head that it's in your hands, you know, the safety of your family is in your hands. So it's that you have to make the decision whether you want them to get hurt or not, you know, and in making that decision, no, I am left in the hurt, right? And so that is not anything easy for any child to to go through. And I went through that. It was not a case where, you know, penetration happened every week, every month, every whatever. It was not a case like that. But molestation, that was consistent, you know, and most of the time it was when he came into my room at night. And so, you know, that girl not really sleep, you know, not really sleep, because I'm looking and I'm listening for the moment when the door would open and whatever would happen. No, the lock, I think it was one of my big brothers that eventually put a lock on the door, but that was after, you know, everything came out. So that happened for a while, taking me into primary years,
right,
taking me into high school years.
The high school years.
A little bit of primary into high school years, right?
They started going to high school now. All of these traumatic events happening to you at home, and you're now at school, and he's demanding that you do well at school, but at the same time he wants to have his way right. So you are telling me now that it got to a point now when you refuse to have it, and
right.
that caused a little conflict where he even showed up at your school.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So talk to us about that.
All right. So you know, as you get older and more knowledgeable, you are now more aware of the wrong of the situation. So the older I got, and then being a Christian and being in church, and you know, you hear the Sunday school lessons and you hear the messages preaching, and now you know what sexual sin is, you know what sexual immorality is, you know what, you know, and so that made it even worse, because now it's like the guilt of sin, you know, is added to this, and you don't want to be a part of it, but you don't know how to get out of it. Yeah, look here, a whole heap of burden, believe me.
Yes.
So going on and getting old, I started to refuse, and this is where the physical abuse became more. The physical abuse became more. One event that really stood out to me is one beating that I got. I don't know if you remember, they used to have some belts that have some metal tips. So they have metal on the tip of that, you know, that's that triangular tip, but it has metal on it. And I remember when, you know, he beat me one at a time, and the belt hit me across my face, and the tip of the belt, you know, scraped my nose.
Yeah.
And I went to church, and he was a minister at the time, but now my pastor. And I remember he asked me what happened to my nose, and I was so embarrassed. I told him that me and my brother, we were, you know, play fighting on the bed, and him kicked me off the bed. And the minister said to me, "Are you fell on your nose?" You know, because him know not go so. Not like that. You know, but what would I say though? You know, what would I say? I did not want, you know, that stigma to be on me at church or school. It was enough dealing with it in my home and my community, you know. So I had to find stories to tell, you know, for this happening. Imagine going to school with bruises and stuff on you.
You told me about the bargain he tried to make to you one of the times.
Look here, yeah, I remember that. Because I was refusing at this point. I remember one night he came into my room, and because he would give us lunch money, right? My mom would go to work early mornings, and so would leave him to say, give the kids lunch money and whatever. No, I did not get my lunch money. He came into my room the night, and this was the bargain, that if I didn't decide to have sex with him, then I would not get my lunch money, and he would beat me at school in front of everybody. No, I was a shy girl, right? And I know that all of this that was happening attributed to that. So I was, you know, reserved. I would express myself in singing, but that was it.
Right.
And at school, I wasn't known as a talkative one. I was one that they would come, like students would come to if them have a problem. God was preparing me from early, Latoya, for everything that I'm doing now, right? They would come to me. I was a peer counselor and all of that. I was the reserved person, but not because I didn't have a lot to say, but I just didn't know how to say it because I was hurting so much. I was really damaged. So I remember when I was in class, I was in grade 8. I remember exactly what it was. I attended St. Catherine High School. And I remember where my grade 8 class was, and we were right beside the quadrangle where they would have devotion. And I remember hearing his truck, because you could hear his truck from the highway coming. And I remember hearing his truck. And look here, if I could disappear, I would have disappeared because I know what he was coming about. And I listened as the truck came into the school. And I remember him just coming up to the front of the door and asking my teacher to excuse me. I went out there shaking. And I went out there. His sideman was in the truck. He lived in a neighboring community to ours. And, you know, but based on the conversation, the sideman knew that something was wrong because a few days after the sideman, because there's somebody who would have walked through a lane and so, he would ask me what happened, you know, because he saw that the conversation, something was wrong based on my expression. When I went out there to him, he asked me what was my decision. Yeah, right there, he was to come to give me my lunch money. You understand? And that was what he came about. And because me never want beaten in front of the old school, I was like, okay, got my lunch money, went back in the class. But that day I didn't stay at home. I left home. Got some clothes in a knapsack. One of my aunts lived at a scheme further up the road. And I got some clothes in my knapsack and I left. But before we got there, at this point, mommy knew.
Yes.
We jumped over that point. How mommy got to know what was happening now. One of my brothers that was sharing room with me heard one night when he came in. And that night, I think he was trying to make another bargain that night, and my brother heard, and my brother, shuffled. So the shuffle when my brother shuffled now, he thought that, my brother was going to wake up, and so he ran out of the room. My brother saw all that, and my brother told my mom. That day was the hardest day ever. To see and hear the pain from my mom, trust me, I would give anything to take back that moment.
Wow.
And so now confronted him, and of course him said, "Lie me I tell," and he denied everything. Latoya, everything he denied and want beat me and the whole works. Thankfully, my mom believed me. Instead of him know that it is out, instead of him, stopping, he got so brazen. I mean, I would pass and he's sitting in the couch and I pass and the man spot me on my butt, like, or he would touch me on my breast. Yeah. So he wasn't hiding anymore.
Right.
So I would make an alarm because like he would do it when my mom's face was turned. She wasn't looking in our direction or probably outside or something. And it was when like I would make an alarm or something that, he would, but he wasn't afraid anymore. Thankfully, there was no, sexual whatever after that. Thankfully, her finding out stopped that, from happening. But no, the touches and the advances were still coming. So I left home and I went to stay with one of my aunts. But that was short-lived. My father found out that I was not home and he found out where I was. Don't know how he found out because the plan was not to tell him where I was. So he found out and he came there. Now my aunt lived in a scheme and the man come with one excitement and threats and want to kick down the door and one whole heap of drama, And then the threats to hurt mommy all of that came in. I was fearful that he was going to kill my mom.
Oh.
That was the type of anger that he was displaying. And so I made the decision to go back home because I wanted to be there somehow to save them, you know, especially my mom, from going through any further abuse from him. So I went back home. I was big enough girl, know that I could defend myself. And so it was more physical abuse now than anything else, right? More physical abuse more than anything else. It got to the point where he was jealous of whatever male friends I had. Did not have boyfriends, just, you know, male friends from church and school. And he was jealous. I remember our culture at church was, you know, a crowd of us as young people, because we had a whole lot of young people back then in church. We would walk everybody home. So all of we walk in a crowd and we let off this one first, and we walk, go down and let off, you know. So any house we got to first, we would ensure they go in and we move on. And I remember they would congregate at the entrance of our lane. But I was ready to go down because I am living in fear of this man now. And one of our church brothers, God rest his soul because he's dead now, he followed me down the lane because down the lane dark and it far. So him follow me go down the lane because I am ready to go in, right? And while we were going down, when we got near to the gate, I heard this truck coming. Lataya, oh my Jesus. I knew what was going to happen. I heard this truck in, and you know, he jumped out of the truck and he ordered me for go in and whatever, went in, and the man hit me in my face. One box. Didn't do anything, you know. We were church and I just got the company to go home. That was it. One box, right? When my mom heard, because my scream out and whatever, my mom knew why he did it. She knew why he did it. You know, it was not a father being protective. It was like a man and woman jealousy kind of thing. You know, so I lived with that until I got to age 19. I decided I wasn't going to have it. I was done with high school. You know, tried to get a job after that and all of that. High school wasn't as successful as I had hoped it would be under the circumstances. So I got some sexy subjects, but not all that I wanted. To be honest, I didn't have a career path. I could not see myself in anything at the time. That wasn't even on my mind, to be honest. I just wanted to get by day. So I didn't have a plan for university or whatever was concerned. You know, I was just thankful I got to high school. But I was going to camp, youth camp every year. But when camp, you know, when camp is finished, I would cry because I don't want to go back home. You know, camp was one of the best things that could have ever happened to me. I really don't think the organizers of camp, when they were planning it for the first time, saw it as an oasis for young people. You know, it was a safe space for me back then. And it was while I was at camp that I met a sister from one of our neighboring churches in St. Anne. And she was very welcoming, and I was able to speak to her. She was like a mother figure. And I drew to her immediately. It was very welcoming. And I was able to share, you know, what was happening at home with her. And right off the bat, she invited me to come and stay with her. You know, she said, you know, you cannot be living that way and whatever. And so she asked me to come. She said, as long as I can reach there, then I'll be able to live with her. That was a saving grace for me at that time, because now I have a way to get out of living that life. So that started the aspect of my journey.
All right. Thank you, Michelle McIntyre, for sharing your story with me today. That is part one of the story of Michelle McIntyre, an overcomer indeed. In part two, her story will continue and what it was like when she left home and she would have moved with this sister that she would have met and what transpired thereafter. There are so many good things coming up in part 2. Part 2 has a lot of goodies.
Amen.
Part 2, you will hear about all the wonderful things she's doing, the book she's writing. She's now an entrepreneur. You'll hear about that. She's a recording artist. You'll hear all about that in part 2. So I want you to stay tuned for part 2 of Michelle McIntyre's story. Michelle, thank you so much for sharing this afternoon with me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.